the time frame of the sessions, there are 6 sessions over 14 months. First one beginning this September. The sessions begin on a Wednesday evening and end on a Sunday at noon, meaning that Wednesdays and Sundays are travel days. The first sessions 1 through 4 and session 6 flow on that schedule, Wednesday to Sunday. And they're all here in Asheville, in the Asheville area. Sessions 5 is where we take the group out on their quest. And this is the part when I say it's a training and initiation, is that I can provide you with the experiences and the training of information. Where you take that is what happens, is up to what happens between you and spirit when you go out on the mountain for your quest. That's your relationship, that's your direction. That can't be given to you by human hands. And so our 5th session is my commitment to the group is to take them somewhere else in the country. Asheville is very beautiful. We spend 5 sessions here. Like for this training group in September, later September, after our first session meets for the second group, I'll be taking them out to Catalina Island off the coast of California to quest out there for their training quest. And then we do a wrap up at the last session, which will be in November for them. In the training, the quest time frame is 8 nights, 9 days. All of those time frames are on the website. If you went on the website and clicked on the training button, you would see all that listed there as far as the particular time frames of the trainings. And it's to build a conceptual framework around the information. We begin the training in the way that we guide, and that is when we come onto the land, the first parts of the training are entering into relationship with the very land that we're on. I keep telling my trainees it's all about relationship, whether we're talking with ancestors or spirits of the land or the hawk that lives down the river from where we're camping. It's relationship, relationship, relationship. And so we begin the training essentially by entering into relationship with the very land that we're working on. There's teachings around protocols of entering into relationship. Some of these I've learned from my teachers, where whether you're introducing yourself to the river, say, Grandmother River, my name is Kedar. I bring this milk and honey as an offering. I am here to bring these people, to work with these people, to help deepen their relationship with you. And my request is that you assist me in having the eyes that are bigger than my eyes, or the ears that can hear more than I can hear by myself, or the words that you might have me speak. And I offer my gratitude for that. So there's simply protocols of how do you enter into relationship with the beings of a land that you're going on to. So the training begins in if we took the Vision Quest experience, which both Meg and Peter referenced, which is an 11-day initiatory process, and slow it way down, you have the elements of the training. The other part of the quest that we deepen way into, so then the quest, there's a place where I call finding your place on the wheel. So I have a way of taking a directional wheel, some would call it a cosmology wheel or a medicine wheel, a 4-directional wheel, using the seasons and the directions, and overlay it with some internal psychological reference points. So I teach this way of understanding ourselves and our relationship to everything around us. What are our strengths? Like if you find that you have a strength in the initiatory shield of the West, it's about introspection and intuition and insight and observation. And maybe this is a strength. And you find that you have a bit of a challenge with the initiatory shield of the South, which is more of taking inspiration and moving it into action. You learn how to first place yourself on the wheel, find your strengths, find your challenges. And then part of the training is you also learn how to identify where other people are that you're guiding. So my trainees first essentially diagnose themselves, find where they are on the wheel, and then they spend time beginning to examine people that they're working with and being with as where they fall on the wheel. What are their edges, what are their strengths? And then they learn processes of conceptualizing ritual prescriptions that address that very place on the wheel. So that if somebody's has very strong energy in the east, gets very clear, can get very precise about things, but has difficulty moving it into action, they might begin to, what you would begin to assimilate is we're probably working with the elements of air or fire in terms of bringing creative energy into expression. So there's the teaching that in ritual and in ceremony, to use an analogy, when you go to the pharmacy and you get your prescription, it'll say active ingredients and it lists certain things. In ritual, the active ingredients are the elements. So ritual without the active ingredients is considered more of a status, what's called status ritual rather than radical ritual. So the presence of fire, both as an elemental ancestor and as a prescriptive medicine to address certain things, or water as an elemental ancestor or as a prescriptive ritual element to address certain ailments. So you learn this process of working with people in a very indigenous way in terms of what's going on in your life. Where do I see you on this medicine wheel, and what ritual prescriptions that I might offer you in order to address, or that I might work with you doing in order to address that particular place of stuckness. So as you guide people, if we're talking about a vision fast and you're sending people out on the land for however, a day, 4 days, nights, you can say, here's some ritual prescriptions I want to suggest for you based on what I've learned about you, that you carry out during your time out there. So that's the beginning. And we also talk about kind of missed over the historical context of rites of passage, both globally and structure and form, and what makes something a rite of passage. We talk about cultural appropriation and misappropriation and ethics, and the importance of that, and integrity, and sensitivity to those dynamics. So we build all of that context before we really move into the teaching part. And then the trainees spend time working with that information. There's homework in between sessions that they do. And then we move from that phase of the initiatory process into what's called the calling and the severance phase. We kind of attend to the calling and the severance as the first part. And then we move into severance and threshold. The calling is what brings you to this experience. Was your calling one filled with disasters and misfortunes? Was your calling filled with inspiration? Or did you simply back into it accidentally and found yourself in it? But there's some time ago, somebody asked me, so what if you refuse it? And I said, well, there's this thing called refusing the call, and it's a pretty messy life to refuse your own call. So there's a way in which you will be going through this either intentionally or unintentionally. It's unavoidable. Even our life stages are set up to guide us through these things at certain ages. We're just, it's just called up in us. So then with the focus shifting from calling and severance to threshold, and I spend a lot of time with the threshold phase. Talk about death lodge as well, part of severance, death lodge work. And the way I do death lodge work would be different than maybe how one of my guides do death lodge work. I have 30 years of both clinical knowledge and experience in working with indigenous teachers, and I tend to do death lodge out of those experiences. Death lodge is, if you think of life as beginning with a birth, generally, we can say in a linear way, it begins at birth and ends at death. Rites of passages are reversed. They begin with a death and end with a birth. And in that context, whenever approaching a rite of passage, there's this idea of severance, of death, of what's falling away. And so the death lodge during Vision Quest and the death lodge, the training about doing death lodge with people is to help people identify what it is in their lives that are falling away, or what is it that they're picking up. Maybe they're at a different stage and they're at a transition of picking up something rather than putting down something. And so death lodge is a period of preparation for the actual solo time. When most people think of the word vision fast or vision quest, they think about the time you're out on the land by yourself. That's the easy part. What happens to you as you approach it and what happens to you when you come back, that's the hard part. So that in the training, we teach our guides how to prepare people in death lodge to really identify their shadows, identify their strengths, their challenges. Maybe they give them certain ritual prescriptions, or maybe certain assignments, like you might want to make a will, or go visit all the people in your life that you have unresolved issues with so you can die a good death, as they say. So in this preparation for death, you help people prepare as if they were approaching death, as a way to clean up their life. And there's a lot of various rituals or ceremonies that are taught to help people do that. So that's the severance phase, and that's we teach our guides about how to assist people in that preparation for the actual threshold. The threshold phase is, as I say, the one that most people think of when they hear those words, vision quest or vision fast. And that's the departure from the village out into the wilderness. And it can be a day-long medicine walk, or it can be 4 days and 4 nights on your own, which is what we do, the 4 days and 4 nights. And what's called the 3 taboos of the threshold. I'll put one of my trainees on the spot here on the video. What are the 3 taboos of the rite of passage, the threshold phase? Anybody remember?
I can jump in here for a few minutes. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Can you see me? Am I in the main screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a few things. First, to answer your question, the 3 taboos that we usually discuss are the fasting, the solitude, and the exposure. And that can be a really beautiful way to look at if you have someone coming into the Vision Quest and kind of tracking where they're at in their process. And what you've taught us, Kedar, is that piece of is their edge the fasting? Is their edge the solitude, or is it the exposure? And all of those being taboos in our, everyday society. And sometimes it's all 3, but usually it's 1 or 2. For me, it was fasting. So,
Thanks, Callie. The
yeah.
three taboos that Callie's talking about are in So if we look at rites of passage or initiatory experiences, there would always be three common elements. And rites of passage have been done across the planet throughout history in various ways. But the common themes that they would have present in them would be fasting, exposure, and solitude. So fasting, we teach a water fast. And if there are no, we'd screen out certain medical complications. We teach our staff how to do that. But given the absence of any medical challenges, a water fast, the exposure is that you're out exposed to the natural world. So I encourage people, you don't take a tent because this isn't a camping trip. You can take a tarp, but you're open to the environment. So fasting, exposure, and the solitude is a tricky one, because you're really not alone out there at all, and you discover that pretty quickly. But the idea that you're out of other human contact, so you're by yourself in the sense of other human contact. So these were the common threads of rites of passage across history and across the globe, that they were always present. So we teach these aspects. And the other thing Callie has mentioned is I also teach my trainees, when you're preparing people in the training, you watch for where their edges are, because they will always have an edge that shows up in one of those three categories. And it will always be one of those three categories. You just kind of watch for which one it is. And that's just information as a guide to be aware of when you're working with people. So the training and preparation for the threshold phase both happens in finding your place in the wheel and the death lodge work and the prescriptive rituals that you learn to assess people for and offer people or to do with others. And then we teach a particular version of a threshold ceremony, which is we get up at sunrise to send your people out on the land, whether it be for a day and a night or 4 days and a night or 4 nights. There's a threshold departure ceremony. And then on the 5th morning, in the way that we do it, there's a threshold return ceremony. And so we do some teachings around the importance of those crucial moments. Then there's the return, so on the 5th morning, we teach people how to bring others back in through the threshold return ceremony and all the intricacies of that. And then also the feast, the celebratory meal. And then we teach about, it's called the Council of Elders, which is about listening to the stories. So after a time when people come back, I teach the trainees that how to mirror stories back and to mirror them in a way that helps individuals create their own personal mythology. So if you remember in the beginning, I said that, we live in a culture where if you're not guided to connect in with your own personal mythology, or even know that you have one, we often are ascribed to the mythologies of a greater culture, and we know what those mythologies about. If you want to know the mythologies of the greater culture, you just look around and see what the tallest buildings are, and that tells you the primary myths of a culture. And so when you ascribe to the cultural mythologies, you're simply taking on those occupations, jobs, or things that you think the culture will reinforce. You can have a good life. And certainly nothing wrong with that, but that's doing so may as one poem, I can't remember who wrote it, said there'll be many things that evade you in doing that, but there's nothing wrong with living that kind of life. So the stories of return is where we listen to the stories, and I teach the staff how to listen to the stories from the context of understanding story as a living entity. stories are not fixed in time the way that we think about them. We're used to a tendency of psychologizing stories to extract some meaning was not the essence of indigenous stories. The essence of stories is relationship. And so medicine stories could be told and heard hundreds of times. But you hear it 100 times, and it's never about understanding. It's about what is your relationship to it in the moment? What arises up in the story that calls you into it? And so when you return from your threshold time, the staff is taught how to help you identify the places in your story that call you into aliveness. Where does your story reflect your medicine? Where does it reflect your challenge? And also helping participants understand that this story that just unfolded in the past however many days, and for their case 4 days, is also predictive. Like we can listen to a story and we can tell what the person is going to be facing within the next 3 months, and likely how they'll deal with it, because it's all in the story. And so you learned this way of learning how to be in relationship stories as living entities, as opposed to a fixed thing that you're trying to extract some meaning out of, that once you got it, you can put it aside and go on to the next story. So we teach the Council of Elders Circle is a way where everybody is taught how to mirror stories back in a third person context, so that the listener can stand outside the story and hear what the guide is saying. So you're not telling them about, well, you did this or you did that. I teach people how to mirror the story back as if you're talking about a third person. And then the listener to the mirroring hears it as a story about this mythological being that encountered, 3 hawks or 2 deer one morning at sunrise, or and it takes on this rich form. So we teach that way of mirroring. And then after that, there's the understanding of the giveaway. And as Black Elk said in Black Elk Speaks in that book, he says, it's easy to go up on the mountain and have a vision. Anybody can do that. He said, but we don't say you had a vision until you come back and make it real for people to see. Then we say you had a vision. And so this idea of the giveaway is the context of initiation isn't complete until it's been given away. That's why often in initiatory passages, those that have been initiated before, their initiation process isn't done until they assist the next group in coming through their initiation, and then it's been given away. And so in another context, if you are going on your own individual quest, when you come off the mountain, once you start delivering those new awarenesses to your family, to your community, to your people, that's the giveaway. And so we build in the teachings around the giveaway ceremony and the enactment of a giveaway ceremony with people you're guiding. And then there's the teaching about how to prepare people for the return. One of the most challenging places of the initiatory passage is the return. And it's you can enter this passage with enthusiasm and on a wave of excitement, and then you after some period of time, it could be weeks, it could be months. I see some of my trainees smiling, but at some point you're going to encounter what's called a deflation. Maybe you forgot to pay your mortgage when you left. But you encounter something that brings you back down to earth and plants you on the ground. And then the work of reharvesting your vision and remembering and believing in that what happened is true, and reconnecting with people that you were with and moving it forward. And so we teach in the training, I teach the staff both how to prepare your your initiatory candidates for the return, because they themselves have been through it. And then how do you keep it alive? And how to building community is a part of keeping this alive. And so as Meg was mentioning, Meg/Lynn up there in the left corner of my screen anyway, was saying, when I said to her, how will this arc through you? Maybe you won't necessarily become a vision fast or rite of passage guide where you're the one actually taking people into the wilderness, but it's going to arc through you differently if it doesn't arc that way. And you mind if I make a comment about how I see arcing through you in particular, Meg? Just nod your head if that's okay. All right. So as a professional musician who's in front of a lot of people, some incredible songs and voice and messages have come out, have arced through her in that particular way, where the initiatory journey can be taking somebody through one of her concerts. And then got the same permission with you, Callie? Just nod, you're a little bit. And then with Callie, it arcs through in that, and guiding others through wilderness rites of passage, and like in that direct way. And then through Peter, they'll get thumbs up. Peter, can I talk about you? Thank you, all right. As a teacher with young men, and how to begin to sculpt and create meaningful rites of passages in their world. So it doesn't, the training isn't to get you to be me. That would be, you wouldn't want that. The training is to get you to be you, and more of you and who you came here to be in the way that you came to do it. And so gathering all this information together prepares you to do that in the way that you'll do it. The reason that I call the training in the ceremonial art of guiding wilderness rites of passage, because I didn't want to limit it to the context of simply this idea of vision fast or vision quest. I want my trainees to be prepared that if anyone were to come to them and say, let's say a middle-aged mom with a teenage daughter, I'm pulling my hair, I don't know what to do with this kid, can you help? They can quickly map it into an initiatory passage experience and say, yeah, I have some ideas of how we could do this, how we could support your daughter, and be able to create or co-create with that parent's maybe aunts or grandmothers, or to create something for this kid, maybe even with some of her other friends, an experience that will do this. So I wanted it to be broad enough so that you could apply the knowledge to different situations, whether it be with yourself or others or groups, and expanded enough to where if you went through the training and then wanted to go all the way for certification, that you could simply, you'd be prepared to take people out for 2 weeks into the wilderness and take them through the whole initiatory process, including the 4 days and 4 nights, and everything. What do you need in your first aid box, and how you're going to set up your kitchen, to everything else, and how many staff you need. And so I wanted to be that broad in spectrum in terms of how you can apply it. As I say, bringing in my personal context of ceremony and ritual that comes from my teachers, both here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and then in West Africa, and my ancestral teachers in the British Isles. But really bringing in the richness of ceremony and ritual. So it's not just about teaching the form and process and structure of a rite of passage and how to take one through it. It's really, I think, as Peter was saying, this is gonna challenge you. This is gonna deepen you into you. So like in one of our weekend sessions, it's all about the focuses in working with the elemental ancestors. And so we do these what I call radical rituals for fire and water and earth and air, that are pretty intensive. And because it's about your personal relationship as you go through these, so that when you're working with people, if you were to give somebody a prescriptive ritual that involved earth, would it be an earth ritual that was an offering, or would it be an earth ritual that was a burial, and that was much more of a larger context of experience? Or if you were to do a fire ritual with somebody or offer that kind of prescriptive ritual, would it be the intensive 3 fires that we do in our training and in a trench, and quite a elaborate, intense experience? Or would it be sitting with a candle? So I take the trainees through the most intense, radical, elemental rituals that I've experienced, so that they have that to work from. So that's just one training session.